Section 1, Introduction and Example 1. I want to start by giving you an example of an ethical problem often confronted by hiring managers. Humor me by reading it, deciding on your personal answer, and also by asking others in your workplace to read it and give their answers. I'll tell you mine at the end of this talk. So here's the hiring dilemma. A high-tech company had been looking for a specific candidate for several months. Their job description was clear and listed some very important skills and experience. One day, at the point at which they had just about given up their quest for the perfect candidate, a man walked in who had many of the skills they needed, but was missing some of the more important ones. Needing to fill the slot, they offered him the position. Let's call him Candidate B. 2 days later, after the verbal offer was given, but the written offer and acceptance not yet signed, the perfect person walked in seeking the job. This man, Candidate A, had all the skills and experience the company desired. He was perfect, but they had already made an offer to Candidate B. So who should you hire? A or B or both? What should they do? Well, they could hire, answer A, they could hire Candidate A and send a note of apology to Candidate B telling him they were rescinding the offer. Choice B, they could hire Candidate B because they had made him an offer and it was the ethical thing to do, even though the offer wasn't finalized. C, they could hire both. Candidate A was perfect and they would find a slot for Candidate B. D, hire neither and close the wreck until sometime in the future and avoid the hiring dilemma. Or E, quit the job rather than be forced to make the decision. Section 2. Let's talk about the linkage between attitude and ethics. Before I even give you some formal definitions of these two words, let me tell you in more detail why I decided to link them together. With the right attitude, which is to do your best, to do no harm, to treat people fairly and be honest in all you do, you're naturally ethical. If we could convince everyone to behave with this positive attitude, there probably would be 95% less car accidents, burglaries, or other crimes. Ethics, on the other hand, is a set of rules. Attitude comes from the heart and mind. In our business organizations, we frequently have a code of values. If you think about it, those values require specific attitudes and behaviors. Without the right attitude, or frame of mind if you prefer, the values are given lip service at best. When we talk about walking our talk, we're stating the importance of integrity, an attitude which dictates a set of behavior. One can follow the rules, but have a lousy attitude doing so. Attitude comes from the heart and mind. Ethics is a set of rules. Let me show you what I mean. I was conducting a series of workshops for a county agency. One of the workshops met regularly on Wednesday from 3 to 5 p.m. Quitting time for this organization was 5 p.m. Each week, one of the participants folded up her notebook, took out her purse, applied lipstick, closed the purse, and sat with her hands folded, waiting for 5 p.m. She did this over and over again at 4:45. By the way, she was a union representative, someone who should have been setting a fine example. Well, maybe she was setting the example she thought was correct. She didn't leave until 5 p.m. Technically, she was waiting for the bell to ring. Attitude said what was being discussed in the workshop didn't matter to her, and she didn't owe her employer the 15 minutes she was sitting there. She just had to follow the rules and not leave before 5 p.m. Ethics are a set of rules. Attitude is living a principled life. Now that I've given you an example of a poor attitude, let me share what I observed of a fabulously positive workplace attitude. I spent several minutes many times over in the lobby of one of the buildings at National Semiconductor, waiting to be escorted into my meeting with the general manager. So I had ample opportunity to watch the lobby receptionist in action. I'm going to share with you just two of the many observations I made. One, an employee left her briefcase in the lobby. Instead of ignoring it or merely giving it to Lost and Found, the receptionist called the employee to tell her that she had her briefcase and was keeping it in a safe place until it could be retrieved. The next example, which really touched my heart, a poorly dressed family whose members really appeared to be poor and in need came into the lobby. Instead of having them removed or being short with them, she spoke with them as kindly as she did with any other executive coming in. The adults of this family group were looking for a job. She directed them to the correct building, gave them a hand-drawn map, and also the name of the person they should ask for. This is, in my opinion, customer service at its best. The bottom line, she was so well liked, she frequently received small gifts such as flowers, candy, etc. Okay, let's now define our terms, because everybody has to know what their terms are. So what I'm going to do is give you some Webster dictionary terms, but let me just start out by telling you that, in my opinion, ethics stands somewhere in the middle of morality and law. It's a code of behavior that includes areas specific to a particular profession, business, or association. There are differences in ethical codes people are asked to sign, including those in employee handbooks, and at some point we're going to talk about them. But let's look at what Webster says. Webster says the definition of moral pertains to or is concerned with right conduct or the distinction between right and wrong. It also says, as a second definition, concerned with the principles of rules of right conduct. Morality is conformity to the rules of right conduct, moral or virtuous conduct. Secondly, virtue in sexual matters, chastity, a moral quality of character. Ethic is defined as the body of moral principles or values governing or distinctive of a particular culture or group. The second definition is a complex of moral precepts held or rules of conduct followed by an individual. Ethical, therefore, pertaining to or dealing with morals or the principles of morality, pertaining to right and wrong conduct, in accordance with the rules or standards for right conduct or practice, especially the standards of a profession. Attitude is described by Webster as the manner, disposition, feeling, position, etc., with regard to a person or thing, a tendency or orientation, especially of the mind. And the second definition is a position or posture of the body appropriate to or expressive of an action, an emotion, etc. I want to talk next about moral decisions. And I want to tell you an interesting story. When I looked up morality in Wikipedia, I found a fascinating series of articles written by Sir Bernard Williams. Apparently he wrote many books in his attempt to understand and explain morality and ethics. Borrowing from him, I want to offer you one of his examples and then his explanation. He says, take the case of Jim, a botanist doing research in a South American country led by a brutal dictator. Unfortunately, Jim finds himself in a small town facing 20 Indian rebels who have been captured and tied up as examples of what will happen to others. The captain who has arrested them says that if Jim will kill one, the others will be released in honor of Jim's status as a guest. But if he does not kill one, they will all be killed. So Williams hypothesizes that, and I quote, the utilitarian would favor Jim killing one of the men, unquote. Williams argued against this, saying in part, quote, the utilitarian, turning us into empty vessels by means of which consequences occur, rather than preserving our status as moral actors. He says moral decisions must preserve our psychological identity and integrity. I love that phrase. I so thoroughly agree that our moral decisions must preserve our psychological identity and integrity. As a child, when I asked my parents for advice about something pertaining to right and wrong, the answer almost always was, quote, "You have to look yourself in the mirror," unquote. Decide accordingly. That has stood me in good stead through the years. It's all about learning self-respect. So let me give you another example. This is an important one. Most employee manuals have a phrase designed to acknowledge and respect the diversity of its employees. However, the word respect is the way this demand for a specific attitude and behavior is described. All new employees must sign this agreement. Sometimes, though, a very religious person who believes that homosexuality is a sin feels obligated to question the word respect, stating that their religious beliefs do not allow them to respect people who are leading what they, these very religious people, believe to be a sinful life. So utilitarian ethics would suggest that this person just ignore the phrase and sign the document anyway. Morality would suggest the person follow their moral principles, even though I or you or your HR people might disagree. So I know of HR people who wouldn't yield and disallowed people questioning this phrase to be hired, our way or the highway. However, whether you or I agree or disagree with the position of the religious person, he or she has the right to his or her belief. So I ask, wouldn't it be simpler to change the word respect to something like, quote, behave courteously to all concerned?